Good evening and thanks for coming, guys. It's a really good turnout tonight. It's good to see a lot of old faces coming back again. So just out of curiosity, can I see a show of hands of the front-end devs? What would you describe yourself as a front-end dev? Cool. What about back-end developers? Designers? Product people? Anyone I missed? Managers? Yes, excellent. This is all for you. It's for everyone. So at Envato, we've been experimenting with a new way of developing and delivering software, and we've found it's given us a huge amount of advantages. So for one, we've revolutionised the way we work, and this has changed the way we actually develop and deliver software on Envato Market. We have a better understanding of our application, and this is through a fully documented Living Styleguide, as well as a UI library, and this has become our single point of truth for our application's behaviour and the UI's behaviour. As a team, we're more confident, and this is understanding how our changes will affect the application to make sure that we don't introduce any unwanted effects when we're developing, because it's quite tricky. So, and we're more consistent, and this is through the UI. We're sort of consolidating all our interface library, as well as more consistent with our estimation of delivery, so we can guess how long things are going to take because we're getting faster and better. And we're more adaptable. So this is to change or to extending existing features. So, and this is because the code is much cleaner and more robust as a result. So what we're going to cover today is I want to share with you a way that you can change the way you deliver software as a team. So not just for the front enders, but it's for the whole team. So I'm going to cover a business problem that we faced and tell you my frustrations with the current sort of approach of software delivery. And then I'm going to tell you how we chose to work differently as a team, and then we'll recap the benefits, and hopefully I can share some resources with you to get started pretty quickly. So my name's Jordan Lewis. I'm a senior front-end dev at Envato. I've been there over 2.5 years now, and day to day I work on the purchase team for Envato Market. And for the better part of last year I was the team's delivery lead, and a lot of what I'm going to talk about will feed into that. And I'm also one of the co-organisers here at Melb CSS. So in my technical career, I've had experience freelancing, working on small agencies and big applications and teams. So I understand all the problems that team sizes face at any size of the delivery. So what I want to talk to you today is about style guides and how they can really simplify your workflow. And my goal is to make life easier for everyone to sort of develop and deliver software. And I'm a huge fan. I've already given this a talk here on style guides, and I've been talking around the place. So today what I'm going to talk about is sort of a smaller part of a bigger picture. So I'll explain that at the end. So like I said, huge fan. I really only think we've scratched the surface of what we can do with them. So hopefully you like what you see. So who here has heard of Envato? Most hands, cool. Well, we're an ecosystem of sites to help you get creative. So we've got Envato Market, which is an online digital marketplace. Studio, which is a platform to connect clients with handpicked freelancers, and Tuts, which is an e-learning online site. So we're a privately owned company based in Melbourne. Not many people really knew that. So we've got about 260 staff across 30 countries around the world. So Envato Market, which is the team I work on, is made up of these 8 sites. So it's 8 sites, but one code base. So everything you'll see today actually applies to all the sites. So it sells everything from stock templates to footage, 3D models, After Effects files, audio files, you name it, we sell it. A few fun facts about Envato Market. There's an item sold every 5 seconds, and there's about 26 million monthly visitors, I think, or visits. And we've got about 55 developers working across a handful of countries. So we're spread out, and we've got a big team, and you can understand the importance of not breaking any of the UI when you're building it, because it's quite important. So early last year, we knew conversion rates weren't where they could be, and we knew if we improved the user experience of the purchase flow, we could get much better conversions. So our problem is that we've got people buying stuff every 5 seconds, and we needed to deliver the new solution at the same time as the old one's running. So it's really, really tricky, and it's like changing the engine of an F1 car going at full speed. So yeah, you get the idea. So this is the purchase team. It was formed specifically for the task of improving the purchase flow. And at any one time, we had roughly 7 core team members. But over the course of a year, we had 14 different people work on the team at any one point. So having lots of people come and go, and often suddenly, meant we needed a really good strategy of documenting our shared vision and the application's behaviour. We need to be clever about how we onboarded new team members and consolidated the knowledge in all those heads into a central location. So the main goal was to add shopping cart functionality. So you've all probably used shopping carts before, and you understand there's a bunch of functionality you just expect shopping carts to do. We also had some other stuff we wanted to add as well, and some unexpected stuff which popped up along the way. So let's take a look at some of the scope just to give you an idea of the size. So we had to add to cart and buy now options for all the items. We wanted to be able to add to cart from all the search results pages. Once the user has items in their cart, there are a bunch of scenarios we need to deal with, such as emptying, removing, updating, changing, checking out, etc. The checkout page needs to do the thing a checkout page needs to do, and this includes being compliant with many tax laws around the world, and also recently allowing guest users to sign up as part of the flow. And then there's just changes that touch every part of the application, whether you're on mobile or desktop in some weird page, these touched everywhere. And we've got a lot of modals, and it's really important that they look consistent and behave correctly throughout the site, because they're a really important part of the purchase flow. So once you purchase an item, we need to handle things like confirmations, emails, downloads, refunds, the list goes on. It's a bit skewy, but it's all right. So you get an idea of the size of task. So we had a big task ahead of us, and we had to add a feature which touched almost every part of the application, and it involved working closely with a lot of other teams as well as stakeholders. So applications have many moving parts and strong dependencies on all team members, and they're the result of a lot of planning, designing, building, refining, and delivering of software. I still have a lot of frustration with how we previously went about things, but I'm going to cover some of these frustrations, and maybe some of them might even resonate with yourself. So the first problem of software delivery is a lack of shared vision. So what are we building, or what's already been built? The importance of having a well-documented application cannot be overstated enough, in my opinion, because without a shared understanding of what we're building, we're not working towards the same goal, and this can be really, really frustrating if it doesn't go right. So we try and communicate with a bunch of tools. So we've got user flows, flowcharts, wireframes. You've all probably used them, and they've all got their strengths and their weaknesses, but they're really useful in the early stages, but they really don't stay up to date unless you keep on updating them and maintaining them. So discussions can happen and features can evolve, but we never go back and update them, so they become stale at a point in time and virtually useless if they're not really up to date. We've also tried using code as documentation, but not everyone in the team understands code, and not everyone who understands code understands the same languages, so it's not a viable solution for documenting shared vision in a way that everyone can understand. And when you've got this many people over the course of a project, they all might have completely different understandings of what is being built or how it behaves in a certain situation. So it's getting that common understanding that's really important, and removing any knowledge silos and putting it all into a highly visible central location so everyone has the same understanding and shared vision. So this leads me to another problem, which is understanding UI behaviour. So through people's interactions with an application or a website, there are a lot of unique scenarios the UI can end up in. Ideally, you want the team to be aware and understand all these scenarios or behaviour, but you just want to be confident that your changes aren't going to break something that you don't know about, pretty much. So with the way we've worked previously, there were many scenarios we were just unaware of, and they were out of sight and out of mind. You could not realise you're breaking something when you do. So we can take a look at some examples to get an idea. What does it look like when someone first visits your site and signs up? Usually we all see it once and then we never see it again. So as a dev, I can tell you in 2.5 years, I've probably seen this once, but I'm changing stuff on the page daily that could break it. So what happens if the state is empty? It's a common thing across many applications. Then there's these one-off pages that are really tricky to get to, and you can only get to by performing a series of really unique actions, and you can't get back to them, and they disappear if you hit refresh. Then we've got modals, and they're a really important part of our design, and by their nature, they're designed to be hidden until you perform an action. So we really want them to be consistent and not be out of sight and out of mind. Then we've got user-generated content. It's impossible to predict, and allowing for changes in content length can be really frustrating when you're building. So this is the same modal, but you can see the difference in content can completely change how it looks and feels. So how do you deal with error messages? They lurk beneath every form, and they're usually different for every error. So you really want to keep an idea of what's it going to look like when something goes wrong. And also your error pages. Like, you don't want your users to see them, but really they're going to see them, and you don't want it looking bad because they're already having a bad time. And then like edge cases. So 1 in a million events can happen several times a day for high traffic websites such as Envato Market. So we've got a lot of these weird events that we just need to keep track of. And user managed content means you don't have control of your own data, so users can come along and delete stuff on you. So you need to be prepared for what happens when they do that. And same with third-party outages. They're like an eclipse. They happen when the moons align, and they don't last for long. So you really need to have a good experience when they do happen and keep an eye on that. As well as localization. It can be slightly different for anyone in different regions around the world. So you need to have an understanding of what they're going to see, and even tax and other stuff is a big one. So you get it. You absolutely get it. A lot of the user experience is hidden, and it's out of sight and out of mind. And then when building the UI, or styling it, or building it, there are a lot of manual testing you need to make sure it's robust. So this often means jumping into the database and resetting something, or doing a specific set of actions to get a page into a certain scenario. So yeah, it's really, really laborious. So recreating scenarios is laborious and it's time consuming. And I see a lot of nodding heads, so yes, you've all been there, so it's painful. And you need to make sure it works on every single device and browser. And it's hard enough cross-browser testing and cross-device testing without the added pain of spinning up a system and getting into that scenario that you've got to manually recreate just to test a specific scenario. And then you've got break responsive. Pretty much every breakpoint is a different scenario you need to account for. And it's a potential hidden state. So, because we understood the problems you traditionally have with software delivery, and we decided to take a slightly different approach to doing this. So we ended up building our application in the Style Guide before we used it in production. So Style Guides, they're not a new concept. In fact, they've been around before the print industry days, but there's been a lot of popularity recently with web-based Style Guides such as tone and voice, pattern libraries, what have I got? UI libraries and branding guidelines, etc. So you might even be familiar with some. A lot of them ship with Bootstrap or Zerb Foundation, so you're probably able to play with a Style Guide even if you haven't realized. So Style Guides are your single point of truth for your application's user interface. They document the UI behavior as well as share this understanding in a highly visible location for all your team members and for everyone to see. They help maintain your consistency of your UI and the components, and importantly, they can save everyone a lot of time and frustration. So I want to explain some fundamental differences between types of style guides. No one really talks about them this way, but let's break it down. We've got static style guides and we've got dynamic style guides. So static are your hand-coded sort of HTML that explain how to use something. They're like a UI library. They provide code examples, and then you can just use that and combine it how you want and then go use it somewhere else. And they're really, really good. Then we've got dynamic style guides. They use real components, so the HTML is abstracted away, so you don't have to type anything or code anything in the style guide. And you just call a component and just pass data into it to bring it to life. So I'll go into more in a lot more detail, both in more detail. But I want to talk about living style guides because that's the topic of this talk, and you probably think, yeah, I knew what a living style guide is, but for the sake of this talk, I want to say that by their nature, most style guides are living to a degree, and many would argue that the dynamic ones I just mentioned are the living ones, but let's agree that any changes to a component in the style guide should result in changes to production. And this is the reason why we're calling it living, and it's the key to a living style guide. So dynamic style guides, which I just mentioned, any changes to the CSS or the HTML, if you did that in your style guide, it should just reflect and bubble up through the application and change it everywhere else that's used. For the static style guides, if you make any tweaks to a button, CSS or something in the style guide, that should make changes to buttons everywhere in your application. So if you do change the markup though, then you've got to go and update that, but that's just what you expect for a UI library. So a UI library is a tool for viewing and building your basic components. So the components form your basic building blocks of building an application, and you can use these to build more complex components too. So typically they're your things like typography, your buttons, your forms, and so on. And they're fantastic because it allows you to see all the available UI components as well as the possible variations you can get them into. And they provide instructions on how to implement them, so the back-end devs are happy because they don't need to know CSS to use them. And they become a really good tool for discussion because they document your code as well as your design. So we've got an example here. This is a purchase form in the sidebar of an item page on Envato Market. So you can see we've got the buttons here. We've got two buttons, they're slightly different, but we've just chained a bunch of classes together and we've got our buttons. But what you don't see is we've got things like our form elements, our typography, our boxes, and our currency sort of formatting, which allows us to build this little component on the page. And what's interesting is there was no custom CSS needed to build this little thing. We just took things from the UI library and built it. So this brings me to structure style guides. And you've probably never heard of them. You probably haven't, because we came up with this name that we call our one. So it's the new type of living style guide we use. So we say that a structure style guide is designed to document an application's UI logic and all of its possible permutations. So the goal that you're after is to have a complete and shared understanding of your application and how it behaves in any situation. So anyone should be able to come along and instantly understand what the shared vision is or what the UI's behaviour is. So by documenting an application's UI in a central location, we're essentially creating a front-end spec. So it's our front-end test to make sure if that looks good, the application looks good. And it helps identify any edge cases early when you're building something or any gaps in the user experience that you might miss when wireframes don't provide all the steps. And importantly, it identifies breakages before they can hit production, which is really good. So it helps team members be confident they know what their changes aren't going to break anything. And ideally, if your UI has logic, like if else, it should be a scenario and it should be put in the style guide. So nothing is out of sight or out of mind. And we'll go through an example. So this is an old screenshot of our one. So structure style guides have three main concepts we need to understand. You've got structures, which are grouping of related components. It's just a way to organize your app. And it can change and you can nest stuff, but just pretty much you go, oh, this is shopping cart related, this is search related. They're just a folder pretty much. And then we have components. So components are the, where are they? Come back. Oh, scenario. So we've got structures, components, and scenarios. So components are our building blocks which help make up a page. Pretty much they're a template and it contains all the HTML that you need in order for that to render. All you need to do is just pass it some data and then it'll sort of spring into the scenario you need. So it's important to know that components can contain other components, and that's pretty much a page is what we're talking about, but it can go much deeper. So on the screen you can see examples of 4 components which make up the checkout page. So we've got billing details, payment method, review, and summary. So scenarios, which I described, represent a set of data that you pass into a component, and this should result in the UI looking or behaving very differently depending on the data that they're given. So this one, it's quite old now, but these components have anywhere between 9 to 16 different scenarios that they can be in. And then there's 4 of these things on a page at any one time. So you can get an understanding of how complex this page could possibly be. So when we put all our components together, we can construct a page, which is the checkout page for the last example. And you guarantee that page to be robust because it's compiled out of well-tested components that we've broken down, we've explored, and we've tested individually. So like I said, we can handle millions of possible permutations of the checkout page just by breaking down each component and styling all the scenarios that come out of it. And up until this point, we don't even have to write back-end code to have all these scenarios. Okay, so this is the fun bit where I jump into the browser. Come back. Okay, so this is the Envato Market Style Guide. You can see on the left we've got 3 top-level folders, and these are what we call guides. So we've got our structure style guide, we've got our UI library, and we've also got our branding, tone and voice sort of guide. So I'll try and go into this. So once you drill into a structure, you can see that you've got all these sort of groupings of related content that we discussed. So we've got things like discovery or financial documents or item stuff or layout. And then if we go into them, let's look at the purchase flow. We can look at the checkout page and see all the components that make up the checkout page. So if we go into billing details, what this one is, that's the breadcrumb, that's the boring one. Let's choose billing details. So you can see here the billing details have 13 different scenarios that this possible component can be in. And what we've got is they're all on a page, and you can see all of them exactly how they look with dummy data that we've fed into them. So this is just one of, I think there's 130 different components in our style guide at the moment. So if we wanted to see what the billing details looked like if the form was empty or if the form was pre-filled, we've got scenarios there to look at it. The great thing is that we can have different levels of visibility. So we can make things public, like this one you can see is public and we can see, but we can also have it unpublished, which allows us for work in progress, and we can also make things restricted. So if you've got really sensitive things, like some of our financial docs, that only certain staff can actually have a look at it. So these are all anchor linkable, so you can click that and then you can share this link with them, with anyone you like. The cool thing is you can actually go, well, show me this, I want to look at it on its own with nothing around it. And this will be really good for regression testing, which we're planning to get hooked up. So this is that component isolated on its own page that I can send a link to anyone to. And go back. And then we've also, all the components actually loaded inside an iframe. I forgot to mention that. So that way our styles of the style guide and the styles of the application are not colliding. So there's no way that you could get a false sort of reading. So we can also resize and see what it looks like on a mobile or a tablet or on your desktop. And the cool thing is I can send someone a link to a mobile specific scenario of a certain thing. And the cool thing we added today, so this is a link to a specific scenario at a phone breakpoint, and it's in English. And if I wanted to just change that to ES, so now we've got our style guide in Spanish. So every component, you can look at what it looks like on a phone in Spanish at a certain scenario that'll happen once in a blue moon. So this allows us to be able to then go use our sort of our testing devices and punch in that URL, and we can test things exactly how we want them to look. So it's really cool. We've got a lot of control over how we test our stuff, and then we can run it through regression testing or all our browser stack and stuff like that. So, so there's a lot more stuff we can add. What else have we got? Yeah. So we don't just limit ourselves to pages. We've also got purchase flow. We've got our HTML emails in the style guide. So we can see what the email the users see in the plain text version as well as the HTML version. And usually this would have been a lot of jumping around through hoops, sort of getting email sent to a testing and then looking at it. This is exactly the same code that gets emailed out to people. And everything else you see is the exact same code that our website runs off. So it is living because it's the exact same code. And if I was to go in and edit this, then it would change the email users see. So we've got other things like plain text, PDF coming, I think. So I'll jump into the UI library. So the UI library is those static things. Ooh, bit of lag. So if we were going to build a modal, for example, and we wanted to go, show me the bits. No, I can't read sideways. So if we wanted to build a modal, these are all our sort of static elements that we can come up and copy classes and just use. So when I build things, I come in here and I style all the CSS individually, and then I go away later and sort of compile the things I need. So you can see modals are made up out of just really boring things like color, border radius, width, and height and stuff. But if I wanted to look for all the modals on our website, I can see all the modals that exist. So if I wanted to look at the shopping cart edit entry modal, I can jump to that from the search. And now we can see all those bits I just described to you assembled to make up a real living, there's no Spanish, it's broken. It's not released yet, that's dev. So let's go back. Modals. So you can see pretty much you can search for anything on a fuzzy search. If you want to look for anything in the shopping cart. We can do a word on shopping, and you can see all the things. So if you wanted to look at what does it look like when something's not for sale error, bam, you just go here and you can see the message. So we are open sourcing this. We're in the middle of a hack week. The plan is to have a gem released soon. We're not going to finish it this week, but all this will be, you should be able to just plug it into your Rails app if you want to. And this is, a lot of this is public at the moment too, so you can go along. I'll share the link at the very end. Okay, so then we've got other stuff like branding, which is not really fleshed out. So this is our embarrassing part. This is where you see our color palette, which we're trying to fix. So it's a bit of a mess, but you get the idea. So everything's there. Anyone can come along. New devs are starting every week. We just go here, get up to speed, and ask if you've got questions. So it's really good. Okay, so let's jump back into this. Cool. So that's what we did. So let's quickly talk about the benefits, and then I'll get off the stage. So by documenting all our UI components and important scenarios for the dynamic stuff and putting it in a central, highly visible location, we've pretty much made ourselves our front-end test. They're our source of truth for anyone to come along and look at, which is really great. We can identify early any edge cases, gaps in the UX, hidden states we need to account for, or even breaking changes before they hit production. The fantastic byproduct of working this way, working directly in the style guide, which we call style guide driven development, is that at the end of it, you're left with free documentation. So at the start, it's really a tool to help you build something, but at the end, it's free documentation and it stays up to date, unlike all those flowcharts and wireframes that I mentioned earlier. So, and it's highly accessible in a highly visible location for everyone, and it won't go stale. So the benefits of a living style guide is for every team member. So not just for the front-end devs doing CSS or HTML, it's for the designers who don't need to really, they can go design in the browser with a front-end dev, or they could understand the application's behaviour without needing to understand code, which is an amazing achievement. And our design team are actually using this now to design directly into, and then sort of, it's their base plate for adding designs into the application. Product can use this to plan new features or get stakeholders up to speed pretty quickly. And you can understand limitations pretty quickly by looking at the style guide. For the front-end devs, you can iterate fast on prototypes and designs, and you can really sort of craft your components, and you can have a nice style guide for all the back-end devs to do your work for you. So it's really good. So by separating our UI and our back-end concerns, we're able to develop in parallel with the back-end devs and the front-end devs as well as the designers. And it actually brings everyone closer together because you need to agree on the parts together more. So the common parts, and do a lot more pair programming. So we're not sort of facilitating a divide, but I think it brings everyone closer together. And designing and developing directly in the style guide means you need to start thinking early about all the scenarios it might end up in, which is actually a really good sort of thing to do. So this is the link, market.styleguide.envato.com. In June we made this public, and I think it was a world first at the time. I don't know if I've seen anyone else do it too, but this link is the very same tool we use day to day to build Envato Market. It's a living, breathing work in progress, and most of the things are likely to change at any time or break, so bear with us. So we're continually adding more, we're open sourcing it, and we're really thrilled to share it with everyone, because why do we want to do this? Well, it's not really useful to anyone to see how our app works, but it's the experience of what you could do with your app that would sort of we want to share. Like we've been refining this for over 2 years now, and we just want people to be able to go, I'd love to do that. It could change our way we work. Bring it to your boss and sort of get the go ahead to do it. There's a whole other talk on how to actually do style guide driven development and how to actually do the back end part of it. But if you come find me after, I'm happy to point you in the right direction or even tell you how we did it. Shameless plug, we're hiring at the moment too. I thought I'd get that in. If you want to work on this, come find me at the end. And if you go to this link, envar.to.std, that'll have a longer version of this talk, as well as all the links and stuff you might need. And we've written some blog posts on our style guide and the process we use. So this is the start of a longer journey. And like I said, I really think we've only scratched the surface of what you can do with it. Translating language and responsive on the fly is just cool stuff we've added this week. So I'd love to hear if anyone's got ideas of what we could add and keep the conversation going. So these are my contact details. Tweet at me or email me if you've got any questions. So thank you.